world after a couple days in La La Land in San Francisco and D.C. and New York and Philadelphia and every other place with my wife's donor. We had a big week. I hope many of you, and I know many of you have been following along on social media as well. More to come on that situation. The hashtag was Niels Saved Jen. And, I didn't watch a lot of college football last weekend. I was banging around on Saturday at the zoo, and it was Niels' birthday, and I was at Amici's, and my wife got sick. We were Roots Chris and all that other stuff. But it was a momentous weekend, I guess, as far as the national championship picture is concerned. Todd Helmick joins us from nationalchamps.net, one of our college football insiders, as well as a Heisman voter as well. Surprises around every corner last weekend, right, Todd Helmick?
Yeah, the number 2, 3, and 4 team in the playoff rankings went down. 2 of them last-second field goals, Michigan and Iowa. And then the big one to me was Pitt going into Death Valley, Clemson, and a 48-yard field goal to end the game. I don't think anybody saw that one coming.
Well, and we talked so much earlier in the year about Clemson and, their tough contest and obviously the Louisville game and, where Florida State was going to be in all of this. But it is a treacherous road, right? And, sort of Michigan walked it a little bit earlier as well, and they're blowing out teams. I don't think anybody saw them going into Iowa and having that kind of trouble, right?
No, Iowa laid an egg the week before going into Happy Valley, Penn State, and got blasted. I think it was like 41-14. Iowa was down on themselves. There's questions again about Coach Ferentz, the head coach for the Hawkeyes, being on that hot seat for the 10th time in 12 years. And, but they rebounded and get a big win at home against the last time Iowa upset a top 4 ranked Michigan was when actually Harbaugh was the quarterback for Michigan.
Wow.
And Iowa beat them on a last second field goal.
Was that 80 or 81 or, was
early
that
80s.
Was that Chuck Long era probably?
I think it might have been. Don't quote me on that, but it's ironic how that, things like that work out. But there's such a fine line of talent in the NFL. It's worse, but you have it too in college these days. And when I always use the old expression, the hunter versus the huntee. It's one thing to be a Louisville early in the season where you're going after the Florida States and the Clemsons, but now you're the Florida State and the Clemson, and everybody's coming after you, and that's a different role to be in, and eventually you're going to get bitten.
Well, how does this thing get cleared up at this point? I mean, there's a whole host of one-loss teams. There's going to be some more teams picking up losses as, the Michigans and the Ohio State square off this week. Becomes an even larger game in a lot of ways because Michigan lost by a point. And then there's just Alabama cruising along and beating everybody's ass by a couple touchdowns, right?
Yeah, I think no matter who you talk to, there's not a lot of chat about Alabama because they're clearly heads above everyone else. Jalen Hurts is a true freshman quarterback. He's rising up the Heisman rankings right now. And then this kid just enrolled in January as an early enrollee. I mean, he's 18 years old, but I'm just going to be straight. I mean, I could play quarterback for Alabama, and I'd probably do okay. I hate to use that analogy, but I don't have Hurts on my Heisman ballot yet.
But he's the guy that hadn't lost. I mean, all the rest of these guys at some point were responsible for losing a football game, and I guess that weighs into this, right?
Well, there's times Alabama could have lost if, because he didn't have a spectacular game. Of course, this was earlier when he had just got the start and roll, but he's got too good of a team around him is the point I'm saying. Alabama's not going to lose if I'm playing quarterback. That's the point I'm making. But Hurts is legit, and it's scary because he's got, at least 2 more years at Alabama, and wow. But in terms of the whole discussion about who's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it'll sort itself out to some degree, but whether they take 2 teams, 4 teams, 8, 16, 32, there's always going to be a handful of teams on the bubble that have an argument.
Well, and the arguments do get settled as these teams play a little bit more. Certainly Louisville has benefited the most from Pittsburgh's generosity over the weekend, right?
You're absolutely right, and I'm a big fan of keeping it at four teams. I don't know if you remember, but I've preached that on your show for years and years, and that is every game is a playoff right now. I mean, Ohio at Michigan State this weekend, Michigan State's not even bowl eligible anymore. In East Lansing, who cares about that game? That's a playoff game.
Right.
That is a playoff game. I mean, even you look at Oklahoma at West Virginia, that's a playoff game. Arizona State at Washington. Who would care about that? That's a playoff game, and and that's what I like about the regular season being meaningful.
Well, with the flip-flops that you see where Iowa stinks one week and beats Michigan, Michigan's, capable of putting 60 or 70 on you, and then they can't score, 14, right? It really has been very, very roller coastery. I mean, even Maryland, and I'll bring them into the conversation in the way they've lost to Ohio State and Michigan after beating Purdue 50-7. And I know part of that was about Perry Hills and the quarterback being out, but there's a real weird inconsistency in college football, right?
There is. I think a lot of that has to do with where parity's gotten greater, and that's due to the way, I'll throw a curveball at you, Nestor, social media has created this. You're like, what's he talking about? How would Twitter and Facebook and all that? Because you look at, say, Maryland's scholarship list for 2017, which they can't officially sign until February. I think they have 20 kids verbally committed already. Dude, 15 years ago, you didn't have anyone committed at this point. What they're doing is handing out scholarships to kids that are sophomores and juniors in high school. The kids don't mature until their senior year of high school a lot of times. So these kids that fall through the cracks that might be a top-rate recruit are now signing with Appalachian State and Houston and who knows, teams like that. And the parity's just gotten insane in that regards. But social media has created this early signing period. So in a weird way, that's what's changed a lot.
Couple of big games here. Let's start with I guess Ohio State, Michigan State, and getting going here through the week and saying, where's the next upset? Where's the next landmine for one of these teams that thinks they're in the Final Four?
It's tough to say because any given week something could happen. Clemson's still got to play South Carolina. Of course, the crazy part is, assuming Ohio State and Michigan win this weekend, they're going to play at Thanksgiving Saturday. And the crazy part is the winner of that's most likely going to the national championship playoff structure. However, the irony is if Ohio State beats Michigan, Penn State plays in the Big Ten championship game. Ohio State still probably goes to the playoffs without even playing for the conference championship game.
I read that earlier in the week, and it almost didn't make any sense to me, right? I mean, it's that bizarre.
Well, Penn State has a loss to Pitt, which is a non-conference game. The difference being, when you're figuring out who the Big Ten East and West champion is, it's based strictly on conference record. But in the playoff structure, they look at every game, including non-conference. That's where the weirdness falls.
Penn State emerging, or re-emerging, I should say. Shocking to you, Todd? I mean, you're in the part of the country out in Western Maryland where there's a lot of Penn State going on out there, as well as West Virginia and some of these other programs that have really emerged all of a sudden.
It's not surprising at all. I've not been a big fan of James Franklin in terms of X's and O's, but he's changing my mind now. This goes back before when he was at Vanderbilt and at Maryland. I wasn't on his ship, but he's earned my respect. Penn State, when I look at Maryland recruits and West Virginia recruits and Virginia recruits and even Virginia Tech. And buddy, when you walk into Happy Valley and there's 110,000 people in that stands, even when they're playing Eastern Michigan, that place is packed. As a recruit, that's a huge advantage. Penn State's always going to have a recruiting advantage over this part of the Middle Atlantic. Even through the Joe Paternos, Jerry Sandusky, NCAA sanctions, they still managed to recruit very well, considering the scholarship reduction. So that gives them a big edge. Penn State is the big head honcho program in this part of the country.
Well, and then there's West Virginia this year, surprising everyone. I mean, they're almost always on Maryland's dance card. Maryland's beaten them. They've sort of languished at various points. Not now. I mean, they're in the conversation here to do something they haven't done in a long time.
Well, ever since Rich Rodriguez took over in Morgantown, that program's never been the same. Meaning, in a better way. I mean, Rich Rodriguez came close on a couple occasions of actually getting into the national championship game. He evolved them into just being a run-of-the-mill program that maybe once every 10 years had a decent team. No, they compete every year now, but I will say the Big 12 conference is the worst of the Power 5. I mean, Oklahoma and West Virginia is going to play this weekend. That's a battle of top 10 teams, according to the AP poll. And yet ESPN Game Day has decided that is the only battle of top 10 teams. Yet ESPN Game Day has decided to go to Kalamazoo to cover the Western Michigan Buffalo game. That's the kind of respect Oklahoma, West Virginia is bringing in because the Big 12 is bad. And I see people jump on the Oklahoma wagon right now. Oh, their offense is so good with Baker Mayfield, a quarterback. Their defense is terrible. I don't think Oklahoma is that good at all. And it's reflected in these playoff rankings. The AP poll has West Virginia like at 9 or 10, whereas the playoff rankings have them like 15 or 16. That's a huge difference. That's because they put a focus on strengths of schedule, and the Big 12 doesn't have it.
Any thoughts about Maryland with Nebraska and Rutgers coming up and bowl eligibility and them getting sort of this bonus game in a season where, let's be honest, the last couple of weeks they've lost by like 100-something to 6?
Literally. They're going to have to beat Rutgers. I don't see any way, shape, or form how they go into Lincoln and win the game the way they're playing right now. Plus, you got the big suspensions due to off-field discrepancies with one of their top running backs and receivers. So they're going to have to beat Rutgers, who's at home, and that's doable because Rutgers is god terrible. I mean, they're really bad, but they're still going to give Maryland all they can handle. So that Again, each week, whether it was Michigan, Ohio State, and now Nebraska, I just look for improvements in Maryland wherever you can find them, and I'm not finding them. I'm finding it's quite the opposite. They're digressing. They're not taking steps forward, and that's sad to see. But DJ Durkin, his first year, he wants that bowl game. So that Rutgers game, man, that's going to be a huge game for the Terps in a lot of ways.
Todd Helmick joining us here from nationalchamps.net, where they give you all the TV listings, and you can be up on everything that's going on in college football. Todd, last thing, for where are we with the Heisman thing from you? You hold a punch card on that, and I know the wind blows in different directions in these wins and these losses, and we discussed the Alabama situation, but where's your Heisman vote going right now?
It's where everyone else's is. Lamar Jackson running away with it, and literally running. He's the best running quarterback I've seen since Michael Vick. And I would say him and Deshaun Watson, the loss to Pitt really hurt. The quarterback for Clemson really hurt his case. He throws. Get this. This is where football is going. For Deshaun Watson last week against Pitt in a loss, threw for an all-time ACC single-game record, 720 yards. And they lost. He threw 70 passes.
That's a big number.
70 passes for 720 yards, and they lost. That's absolutely insane.
That'll never happen again, right? I mean, literally, never happen again.
No, it's an ACC all-time. It'll happen again.
No, but you'll never lose.
Nestor, we're seeing it in the NFL. The NFL is nothing but a passing game anymore. Yeah, there's teams that still run it, and but how often we see now the Bradys and whoever it is throwing 40 passes is average in the NFL now. That was unheard of back in our younger day. Lastly, with the Heisman, I do want to throw one out at you. I always give you Luke Falk. I'm going to show you East Coast bias. Luke Falk, the quarterback for Washington State. This kid leads the country in percentage completion, 77%. You throw 77%, you're doing really good. He's first nationally or second in passing yards, tied for fifth in passing touchdowns. And I watched him last week as they went up and down the field against California. That kid is unbelievable, and he's nowhere near mentioned on the Heisman race because he's in Pullman, Washington, and nobody sees him on the East Coast. I'm telling you that guy's a top 3 Heisman guy to me right now.
Well, they get a chance to go to Boulder and play Colorado 3:30 on Saturday, too, and show it. Lots of games this week, lots to watch. Florida, LSU, a whole bunch of other things going on as well. Always a pleasure to check in with you, my friend, and we'll continue our debates next week as we see who's going to win this weekend and how Maryland can do out in Lincoln, Nebraska, where they never played before, right?
Yeah, Lincoln. I've been to Lincoln one other time, and those people live and die football out there. It's a great atmosphere because they're all so knowledgeable when it comes to the game of football, all the fans that are there.
Sam Cook tells me so. It must be true. Great having you on. Todd Helmick joining us here from nationalchamps.net. I'm Nasty at WNST.net, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook and our YouTube WNS-TV channels. We're going to be at Buffalo Wild Wings in Owings Mills on Monday night for our best seat in the house competition. Pretty good Monday night football game with Oakland and Houston down in Mexico City. Come on out. We got a $100 gift card card and a limo from Fully Loaded Transportation. We take you back and forth to the game the following Monday for Monday Night Football as well. And, of course, the Ravens involved in Monday Night Football a couple weeks from now in Foxborough as well. I'm Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.